But one thing many of you probably know or maybe don't know, I've been in the Mankato region just a little bit under 3 years. And one thing that I've really have come to appreciate is the broad and depth that we have in marketing people. And Laura is one of those people. She's going to talk to us today about how to create a About Us page. Like Wes, Laura is also an SBDC consultant, so she's available basically through the SBDC free of charge for people who need some assistance with marketing. As you know, as we get through this pandemic and as we start to open, marketing is going to be definitely a thing that's going to be very much needed. Due to a family emergency, I had to travel across state. I am quarantined in the office up here, but one thing I noticed, I traveled to states that were officially open. And one thing I noticed on my travels was that even though they were officially open, we were running into situations in which restaurants were still doing carry out. And I said, well, aren't you guys open? They said, no, because we don't know if we're COVID-19 compliant. We're not there yet. So we're just doing takeout. And the restaurants that were open, they only had like 2 or 3 cars. And so I was talking to people, and what's the deal? It's like, well, we just don't feel comfortable enough going back to going to a restaurant or a bar. So the marketing component and building up consumer confidence, I think, is very important. And this is something that we can address a little bit later. But Laura's going to talk to us. This is a subject that her and I were kind of discussing pre-COVID-19. So I said, well, why don't you do this as part of a social media breakfast? Because I think this is a good topic to discuss. And I'm going to have Laura kind of dive into it, introduce herself, and also talk to us about her subject. So Laura, take it over from there.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Hello. Good morning, everybody. So I'm good, Yvonne. Everybody can see me? Okay. So yeah, thanks for asking me to do this. I know, yeah, when we first talked about this, it was not going to be virtual. It was going to be in person. And, but, you know, thankfully and everybody has to deal with it. We're all having to be flexible and adjust. And so, yeah, it's great that we can still do this virtually. So thank you, Yvonne, too, for setting all this up. So I'm not really going to start with a bio of me. Yeah, Mike skipped my bio, which is fine, totally fine. And I know that was sent out beforehand, but I am going to start out with my virtual about page. I'll give you a sense of what I think about pages should be. It just shouldn't be your life story, but I like to use stories in about pages because, again, we all like stories. They're great to convey the information. So my about page, my virtual about page, it starts with a story. And I have a brother who is 7 years older than I am. And when I was a kid, he was very into music. And although I didn't always agree with his musical taste, I really wanted his approval of my musical taste. And at the times, the Beatles were one of my favorite bands. And like every other female, when it comes to boy bands, I had my favorite. And that was Ringo Starr. And it wasn't John or Paul or good-looking George, but Ringo. And it wasn't because I was a huge fan of drummers or even because I thought Ringo was cute. Actually, I thought George was the cutest one. But I came to really like Ringo because I thought he was the least favorite of the Beatles in the entire world, the pop culture world, at least. And I felt that John and Paul and George, they were all the ones that were getting all the fan love. And for Ringo, he was the awkward third wheel, or I guess fourth wheel in that case. Now, granted, I was like 6 at the time, so my thinking was way off. I mean, like any of the Beatles really lacked fans. Come on. But anyway, so I'll continue. So my favorite, like I said, was Ringo. But my brother thought I was an absolute complete idiot for liking Ringo. He told me, oh, nobody likes Ringo. You're stupid. You know, this was like coming from a 13-year-old male teenager. So yeah, like I said, my reasoning was flawed. His reasoning was flawed. Like Ringo really lacked fans. But anyway, I persisted. I felt that Ringo needed my fan love more than I needed my brother's approval. So from my Holly Hobby decorated bedroom, I felt I was doing the right thing. I gave up my need for approval and supported a fanless musician. Yeah, right. Ringo was fanless. But anyway, the point of this story is that even at a young age, I had this compassion for others. I wanted to help others. I wanted to help Ringo. I wanted to even out the playing field. And that compassion is still with me and has led me to being a consultant and helping small business owners. I myself was once a small business owner with several employees, and I know how hard it can be. But I hope that this morning I can take you on a little journey and teach you something about pages that will help your business. And so now I'll get to the presentation, and somebody would do a drum roll. I mean, what's a presentation without a drum roll? So we got to do a little drum roll. So I'm ready to share my screen, Yvonne, and I guess, so I just do this and do this, and hopefully, okay. Does that work? I can't hear anything, Yvonne.
Yes, you look good.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Okay, so presentation. And just to make sure that we're all in the right place, so nobody has accidentally joined this meeting looking for like the Friday morning coffee club, this is a presentation on how to create a better about page for your website. So I'm going to be flipping note pages, so if you hear pages turning, that's all it is. The learning objectives for this morning. What's an about page supposed to do? So after this presentation, hopefully you will learn what's an about page supposed to do, how to use tone of voice, vocabulary, and images to show personality, how to identify your audience's objections, how to choose which story to tell, and to make it interesting for your audience, the do's and don'ts of about pages, and of course, let's have some fun. So what is all this fuss about pages anyways? It is the second most viewed page on websites. Now, this is from a study back in 2015, I think from Google, so the data is a little bit old, but the importance is still relevant. And about pages, they're very important, yet it's one of the most overlooked pages by a website owner. Small business owners underestimate the value of an effective about page. And really, an about page is a marketing tool. Every page of your website is a marketing tool, and it should be used, it should be optimized to be as effective as it can be. So what is an about page really supposed to do? An about page should show your business's personality. And you can do that with your tone of voice, vocabulary, and images. It should communicate your values. And if you've never heard of What's Your Why, there's a TED Talk, Simon Sinek. If you've never heard of it, if you've never watched it, I highly recommend that you Google Simon Sinek and look for his TED Talk about finding your why. And he does a very good job of explaining that. But that leads to your company, your business values. And then the third thing that an about page should do is counter objections. And then ultimately, every page on your website, it should be building your credibility and trustworthiness. Now, let me go back to this counter objections things for just a sec. Now, you might ask, why is it important to counter objections here? Well, when someone is unsure if they can trust you, when you phrase your reasons that they should trust you in terms that help to break down a barrier that they have set up, you make it easier for your message to get across. When we come into a business for the first time or encounter a website for the first time, we have some preconceived notions. And as much as we like to trust people, in the world of consumerism today, people are losing trust in businesses. And you can't just come out and say, hey, we're a trustworthy business, come shop here. Or even, hey, we're a family-run business and have been in business for 30 years, so you can trust us. It just doesn't work anymore. People aren't going to buy that line of reasoning. Building trust is about recognizing what your potential customer is thinking about, what they're questioning, what they're worried about, and then addressing those concerns head on. Really, like I said before, your whole website should be working to build credibility and trust. And, as things are changing due to COVID-19, I think that becomes even more important as we go forward. So the first thing that an about page should do is show your personality, your business's personality. And the way you do that with your content is with your tone of voice, your vocabulary, and your images. So what is this tone of voice thing? It's really the personality of your written content. And it really should match how your audience wants to hear the information that you're giving to them. And to explain it, there's this copywriter, her name is Wood, who has broken down tone of voice into 3 categories with some subcategories. And the way she puts it, there's the authority voice, and business who is providing their clients with information, products, solutions from a position of authority. And within that authority group is the translator, the parent, and the voice of God. The translator takes complex topics and breaks them down into very easy to understand. And a good example of that is you see that with law firms. Next, the parent, this is a business that knows best. Think Gerber baby food for new moms. The voice of God, that's a business whose authority you just don't question. They have the credentials to provide this and nobody questions that authority. I do caution about using that. You really need strong street cred to pull that off so you don't sound judgmental. And then dropping down, there is the accessible tone of voice. That is the friend at the bar and learning as we go. The friend at the bar is great, and it's actually the easiest one to write, but it's like you're talking to your friend. It's the business that you want to hang out with. They're approachable, often fun, non-judgmental. Sometimes they may appear a bit goofy, and often these businesses are bursting with personality. Think Google for that one. The other is this learning as we go. This business is experimental and wants to take their customers on this journey of learning. They're figuring it out. And this is a good one to show authenticity. This tone of voice, it really could help right now during COVID-19 when a lot of us are figuring out things as we go. And lastly is the outlook. These are voices, this is how a business views the world. And you have the eternal optimist who's always thinking that everything will be okay. Life coaches come to mind there. And then there is the anti-establishment who is tired of the status quo and wants to shake things up a bit. That would be, I know there's like some craft beer brands that use this tone very effectively. But really the bottom line here is that you want to use a tone of voice that works with your business, your products and services, and conveys your message so that it aligns with your clients and customers. Think of the tone of voice as kind of a bridge between what you do and your clients and customers. It helps to connect what you're doing with those people. So I'll go back to the example of the law firm. Now, if I were looking for an attorney, thankfully I'm not, but if I were, I would want that authoritative translator tone of voice. I don't think I would want the accessible friend at the bar, and I probably wouldn't trust an eternal optimist. They might be like, oh, hey, you just got sued? No problem. We'll take care of that. Easy peasy. I'm not really sure that would work for me. So like I said, the point is just to match that tone of voice with what your audience, how they want to hear the information that you're giving them. The other way to show personality is with your vocabulary. The words you choose do make a difference. If you regularly use $10 words, but you're selling to an audience that use $5 words, there's going to be a disconnect, and they may think you're a bit snobby. But it really just depends on what your audience expects. A couple of examples, you can read through these, but like saying, for instance, provide them with an opportunity versus give them a chance. As you can see, it just gives a different feel. And, I know these are little things, but it does add up and it does make a difference. I'd also suggest for shooting for a 7th or 8th grade readability, you can use an app called Hemingway. If you just Google Hemingway app, it's free, and you just copy and paste your text and it comes up with a readability grade. It's what I use. It's very effective. It gives you some other suggestions about your text, but again, on that readability grade, I wouldn't go over a 9th grade level. Again, you want to keep it easy for people to understand. Again, but it depends on your audience. The next step is images. And, words are great, but images convey meaning too. Now, if you take a look at these two different corporate headshots, they have a completely different feel. Now, I just pulled these off Google. They do kind of look like the same guy, but I don't really think they are. But the point is, you can get a feeling of they're different. They give a different feel. Same goes with staff or your team pictures. These two give off a very different feel. The one on the left, I feel like, they might be like engineers or bankers or attorneys. And then the one on the right, they're like having fun. That might be Google. I don't know. Again, the bottom line here is just to make sure the images match the personality of your business. You don't want your images, your vocabulary, and your tone of voice to be inconsistent. Often businesses, they really don't think much about this stuff. They've probably heard about the need to be consistent in their communications, but there are a lot of pieces that go into that. So again, the point is to just be intentional with everything. But I know we need to keep moving. So next on what is an about page supposed to do, again, it should communicate your values. And I'm not going to go into a deep dive here, but again, I would really highly recommend that you watch Simon Sinek's TED Talk for that on YouTube or something. But basically, he points out that customers don't buy what you do or how you do something, how you make great bread or how you do bookkeeping. They buy why you do it. And he does an excellent job of explaining it. So again, watch the video. I'm not going to plug it again anymore. But once you figure out your why, it should be part of your about page. And I'll explain how to do that shortly. I promise we'll get there. But lastly, an about page should counter the objections of your prospective customers. What are they worried about when doing business with you? And this is really at the heart of that building trust thing. When you know what your prospect is concerned about, what they're concerned about in terms of providing a solution to their problem, and you address that, you have a greater opportunity to learn their trust. But how do you know which objections to counter? Well, it really depends on their level of awareness of the problem you're trying to solve. So there are different levels of customer awareness. And if you're not familiar with this concept, a very successful and famous copywriter, Gene Schwartz, came up with this in a book he wrote in the mid-60s called Breakthrough Advertising. But it's still very useful today. And it's this concept that people have varying degrees of awareness of a given problem in their life. And the messages you choose to communicate with each segment should be different because their needs are different. And to help explain this, I am going to use a little case study. This is Herbie, and he owns Gertie's Goggles. He sells goggles for cows. And apparently eye abscesses and infections from things like hay or dust being blown into a cow's eye, it's really a thing. Now, granted, Gertie's Goggles is fictitious, but if you want to run with that business idea, go for it. And, we can talk about royalties later. But going back to this, so to use Gertie's Goggles as an example, in the case of cow eye protection, up at the top would be ranchers who don't have a clue that their cows need any protection. They may not be noticing eye irritation in their cows and therefore don't think it's an issue. Next up is the problem-aware rancher. This guy or gal knows there's a problem. He or she's been noticing their cows have bloodshot eyes, some turning into abscesses, but they don't know how to prevent it. Then comes the solution aware rancher. This one has done some research and knows there are solutions out there in the market, but he or she doesn't know about Gerties yet. And then there's the product aware rancher. They know Gerties exist. They're just not sure that it's the right fit for them. And lastly is the most aware rancher. And they're really aware of Gerties, but they're still on the fence. Maybe they're waiting for a sale, a coupon, a BOGO sale, something to push them over the edge. So the point is to know the level of awareness so that you can use the right message to move your prospects further along on their journey towards purchasing your product or service. Now, granted, you could say that, hey, every visitor comes to my site, or every visitor that comes to my site is product aware because they came to my site. They have to know about me. Well, not necessarily. And you really want to know what their state of mind is right before they land on your site. What is it that brought them to your site? This level of awareness helps understand not only what message will work best with them, but also what motivated them to land on your site. So going back to objections. Oh, wait a second. I think I missed. Nope, I didn't. Okay. Going back to objections with Gerties. Now, granted, I'm making assumptions about the objections that each stage may have, but how do you really know what the objections are for your particular audience, for your website? Well, I'd recommend for your business, for your website, that you look at where the majority of your traffic falls on that awareness spectrum. And now you're probably asking, how do you find out where they are on that spectrum? Good question. And some of that you can determine with Google Analytics. And I hope all of you are using Google Analytics or some other analytics tool to track where your visitors are going on your site. But with that data, if you get a lot of traffic going to your blog, for instance, specifically articles where you explain this problem that you're solving, you could surmise that the bulk of your traffic is from people towards the top of the awareness spectrum, maybe problem or solution aware. If you get more traffic that goes straight to your order page, those are closer to the most aware. And say, for instance, if you get more traffic to your about page, that could be people who are product aware but want to know more about you before they buy. Now, I want to pause for just a second and talk about how you learn more about your customers. And I'm sure you've heard or read that you really need to get into the head of your customers. Find out what keeps them up at night. Find out what they're struggling with. And I know that a lot of small business owners, when asked to do this about their customers or prospects, they just think about it. They go into this like deep dive mental exercise and they put themselves in their customer or prospect shoes and they come up with opinions. And sure, you can make assumptions about what they're thinking, but at the end of the day, those are just assumptions. The best way to find out what your prospect is thinking is to talk to them, or ask them through surveys and questionnaires, or monitor social media posts or forums. Look at the comment sections of blogs, videos, or review sites like Yelp or TripAdvisor. Another great place to look is Amazon reviews. So, and some of you may have developed customer personas. I know those are popular. And maybe you've really fleshed those out and even given them names, and that's all great. But again, to do that, you need to do the research. Don't just guess about what's going on there. So to go back to how do you know where the bulk of your customers are on that product awareness spectrum, I would highly recommend the methods I just mentioned about doing the research. And I would suggest adding a question to your sign up. If you have a sign up on your website, add a question there. Or if you don't have a sign up, add a pop-up on your site. And don't think that pop-ups are dead. They can, in the right time and place, be very effective. But ask this question. And it's one I did forget, Yvonne, to put this in the chat, but I will later. But ask this question: what was going on in your life that led you to blank, and blank being your website? And this isn't a multiple choice question. Don't give them options. It's just a fill in. Leave it as a long text answer so you give people room to answer. And, you can easily set up questionnaires through something like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms. I actually use something called Typeform, and then embed that on your website. Getting that feedback can be great at helping you figure out what brought them to your site. What was their state of mind? What were they dealing with that brought them to where you are? And that data, along with site analytics data, will help you determine where they are with product awareness without guessing. So let's go back to Gertie's goggles and look at what the objection might be for different levels of awareness. So if the prospect were, they would probably want to know Herbie isn't a crackpot or charlatan selling a product that won't really help. Now, granted, like I said, this was a fictitious business, and I don't know anybody that actually sells goggles for cows. But just as an example, they would probably, like I said, want to know that Herbie isn't just some crazy dude. They'd want to know that this isn't a scam. If they were solution-aware prospects, they would probably want to know what makes Herbie's solution better than others. Why is he qualified to do this? Why should I believe his product will help me better than anything else? And then if they're product-aware prospects, they would probably want to know Herbie and Gertie's goggles is reliable, is trustworthy, and will follow through. If the prospect places an order, they want to know that Herbie will deliver. So when you look at it this way, if most of Herbie's website visitors are only problem aware, it wouldn't make sense for Herbie content that tried to prove Gertie's goggles will deliver their product on time. The problem aware visitor might look at that and think, whoa, am I in the right place? I was only looking for information about eye protection for cows, and they're already assuming that I'm ready to place an order. I mean, you're just going to throw them off. It's not going to help move them along their journey. So now you've done your research, you know your level of awareness, we've determined their objections. Now, can we finally write this about page? I know you guys have hung in there, and it's getting a little technical, but we will get to the about page, I promise. But first, you need to find the right story. People love stories. Remember back in the beginning when I mentioned what your about page should be doing? It really should be doing, building this credibility, trustworthiness. In order to find the right story, we need to look at what makes a person credible and trustworthy. So here's a list of several qualities, and this is one of the files that I gave you, Yvonne, that's in chat. It's a list of several qualities that credible and trustworthy people share. And I'm sure there are other qualities, but I'd suggest starting with this list. And this is, I'd suggest picking one that ties into the objection that you identified earlier. So, for example, again, let's go back to Herbie and Gertie's goggles. If Herbie found through his research that most of his website traffic was problem aware, the objection was overcoming the idea that Herbie might be a crackpot, he could go with the compassionate trait. Tell a story of a time that, he went out of his way to help others, showing something that shows he really cares about others and isn't going to try to scam anyone. If the traffic on his site, if it was solution-aware prospects and their objections were about Herbie's qualifications, he could go with a story about integrity, a time when Herbie did the right thing and nobody was watching. And if he found his traffic was product aware, their objections, they could be, their objections were about delivering the right product, delivering it on time. Herbie could use a story about being consistent, always showing up for something he committed to. And maybe he has a story in his past about a time, he volunteered to deliver meals to some elderly people, but he got caught in a snowstorm, but found a way to continue and get the meals to the people who needed. The bottom line is that the story should have the visitor continue on their journey with you from whatever mental state they're in when they arrive on your site to ultimately becoming your customer. That's your ultimate goal. So now you've done your research, you've figured out your visitors' objections, you've got your company values, and you've picked a credibility trait that relates to those objections. Phew, I know that's a lot, and I hope you guys are still hanging with me. So now it's time to do a little time travel and search into your past for a story that will hit those 3 points. Will address the credibility trait you chose, counter the objections you identified, and convey your company values. Easy, right? And yay, we finally get to the actual about page. Now it's time to sit down and write. You want to make sure that what you write is engaging and interesting. When telling a story, many writers use what's called the hero journey. And basically, you start with the protagonist, the hero, and they go on a journey where they are transformed in some way and they come out a new and improved version of themselves. That's pretty basic, and you can certainly find more info by Googling hero's journey. But since you're not writing a 300-page novel or screenplay, I hope your about page isn't that long, I'd suggest that you keep things condensed. And the best way to grab your reader's attention in a shortened version is with some type of a predicament, some drama. I read a really good about page story a few months back, and I searched for it for this presentation. I couldn't find it. I wish I would have taken a screenshot because it was that good. But it started out this woman on an airplane attempting her first skydiving experience. So, right there, your ears kind of perk up and you're like thinking, what could go wrong? First time skydiving. Wow, a lot could go wrong. But she told the story about almost not jumping. And I, like I said, I don't remember all the details. It did have a happy ending. She landed safely. But the point is, if you can start your story with something that makes the reader's interest perk up, that's great. And then you want to add some barrier, some obstacle that almost prevents the hero from completing their journey. Now, take the skydiving story, for example. And again, I don't remember the details, so I'm just fudging here. But if she was on a plane getting ready to jump and one of the other passengers, one of the other jumpers say, they were having a panic attack, and she was able to calm them down and sit and talk to them, that shows compassion and kindness. But it's an obstacle that almost prevented her from completing her jump. And then maybe afterwards she realized that even though she was ready and eager to make her first jump, not everyone is in that same state of readiness. And she learned that everyone has a different timetable and tolerance level for trying new things, like jumping out of an airplane for the first time. So it started with drama, excitement. She hit a barrier, overcame that, and was transformed by the journey. It's really easier than it may sound. But as with so many things in life, the more you do something, the better you get at it. So try writing the story, step away for a day, and then come back and work on making it better. So here are a few storytelling tips. This first one is super important. It's not just about storytelling, but about writing your about page. Even though the story is about you, it's really about how your experience is going to help the reader. Keep that in mind. Everything on your website is ultimately about the reader, not about you. Next, the first 50 words are key to grabbing a reader's attention. Make it exciting. Try to end each paragraph with a cliffhanger. You want to leave the reader hanging so they'll continue reading. One tip that I've read is to take the last sentence from a paragraph and put it in the beginning of the next paragraph. Now, of course, you'll need to make adjustments, but just a really quick example is something like, she was driving home late at night and it was raining, but she made it home just before the thunderstorm really let loose. Well, don't end the paragraph with "she made it home." End it just before that, and then start the next paragraph with completing that action or event. It's just a little trick to keep the reader interested and keep them wanting to read more. then don't be concerned about completing about completed paragraphs. Actually, it's better to keep them short, like 3 or 4 sentences. And don't be afraid to write 1-sentence paragraphs. This isn't an English composition class. Nobody is grading this like a paper you had in school. Keep the text relevant, and please don't tell your life story. I've seen so many about pages with these blurbs about the owners or staff members, and they read like something, they read like a cross between a really bad dating profile and an obituary. And I mean, it's like, okay, so, like, here's Bob. When Bob isn't hard at work, he can be found hanging out at the lake, fishing with his dog Daisy, or doing crossword puzzles and supporting his favorite team, the Twins, and volunteering at the local food shelter. It's really boring. And, I read those and I'm like, I'm not sure if I should be praying for Bob or trying to date him. But with so many sites having that type of content, there's a real opportunity to stand out, to be different. When everyone starts doing the same thing with their websites, it becomes white noise and we become numb to it and nobody pays attention. So be brave, be bold, be different. And, kind of all kidding aside, I mean, we are in a time of tremendous change, and sure, a lot is still unknown about how things will shake out for small businesses. But I think one thing is certain, and that is that we're headed in the direction of doing more online rather than less. Commerce was certainly headed in that direction, but this virus has catapulted that change to the forefront. And I think we will find that our new normal involves doing a lot more online than we do now, or at least 3 months ago. So it's really important to pay attention to your website, the messaging you've got going on, the way you communicate with your customers and clients. There are so many businesses that put up a website and then don't look at it for months. And as society starts this shift toward doing more online, it's going to be even more important to use your website effectively. It's a marketing tool that can do so much for your business if you pay attention to it. But all right, I'll get off my soapbox. So we're almost done, but I couldn't leave you with just one page of tips. So here's a bonus page of more tips. Certainly a page with an image, just make sure it's relevant. Create a catchy headline. You really can do better than just putting "About Us" at the top of the page. Come on, be creative. Include images of the owner and staff, but make sure the pictures match the personality of the business. And really avoid professional headshots if you can. I mean, even for law firms and bankers and engineers, I really think that you can be a little more creative. Make it conversational, not formal. Imagine you're talking to a friend over a cup of coffee. And you remember it's P2P. So, I'm sure you've heard of B2B, business to business, and B2C, business to consumer. But in communication, it's really P2P, people to people. Use a vocabulary that matches the business's personality and include a call to action. Every page on your website should have a call to action. And we're at the last slide. This is it. This is Gertie and her beautiful goggles. But I couldn't just leave you with 2 tip sheets. There's a double bonus, and we'll end on a list of do's and don'ts. What not to do on an about page. Please don't include your mission or vision statements. These don't belong anywhere on your website. Those statements are for internal use. They are there to guide your organization internally, keep you and your staff focused. They do not help move a visitor along on their journey with you. The essence of those statements, yes, the essence is part of your values, but please don't slap your mission or vision statement verbatim on your website. Don't have large blocks of text without images or graphics breaking that up. 1-sentence paragraphs are okay. If it's a very small business and the story is about the owner, don't write in third person. You don't need to do that. Keep it I or we. but you really do want to keep the content customer-centric, not business-centric. And what I mean by that is that, it's even though this is your about page and it's about your business, it's really about the customer and how your experience, your story will help them. And don't feel the need to tell everything. Things you should do: show your personality in both your words and design. And yes, so here's the first time I'm mentioning design in this presentation. Design is important. Don't get me wrong. I don't want you to think that it's just all about the words. Design is very important. But the words alone won't carry the day, but neither will the images. I see a lot of websites that the design alone will make them stand out. But it's really the words and the design that need to work together. They're both important. And then proof and edit. Read your own work and then have others read it. Change it. If it's not working, change it. Don't write it and then just forget about it. And be daring and creative. Be bold. Be different. Be all of those things. And that's it. I'm done. Any questions? Yvonne, are you
Kathy
there?
had Kathy Van Roca had a question. Kathy, do you want to just ask your question? I'll unmute you so you can ask it if you'd like.
Sure. This was before when you talked about writing and keeping your wordage on 8th or 9th grade level. We're a technology company, so how do you balance that with also showing that you're an expert in technology?
Yeah, and that can be tough sometimes. Like I said, it really depends on your audience. And if you know that your audience expects very technical language from you, then I would keep it technical. But I also caution against assuming that people have a certain level of understanding. I mean, I'm sure we've all been in a situation where somebody's talking about a concept and we're kind of scratching our head and we're like, okay, I don't really know what they're talking about, but I feel foolish to ask. You don't want to put your audience in a situation where they feel foolish to ask, what does that mean? So, and also, and again, with technical communication, go back to what I said about, remember that it's people communicating with people. So even when you are in a situation where when you are talking one-to-one, even though it might be technical, think about how you communicate those ideas when you're just talking to somebody, having a conversation about that technical idea. Use that type of language. So again, it's more conversational. There are, I'm sure, phrases in whatever your business is that you can explain in a conversational way, and it still then keeps it that person-to-person level rather than making it technical. Now, going back to that grade level thing, and that is kind of a standard. I've read that you don't want to go above a 9th grade. Again, it depends on not only your audience, but the context. I've also read that there's a guy that writes Facebook ads, and he is extremely successful with his Facebook ads. But what he has found is the lower the grade level, even writing at like a 3rd or 4th grade level, those ads pull the best. Now, I don't know what that says about us as a society and Facebook, but you could look at it and think it's a little sad that we have to dumb things down. But I don't want to say that we dumb things down. It's just really that we're communicating on a very basic level. There's a very good book, and if you're interested in user experience, it's oh, for heaven's sake, Steve Krug, and it's called I think it's called Don't Make Me Think. And it's not a very long book. It's very easy to read. But his whole premise is that on your website, don't make people think. You want to make their journey on your website very easy. I kind of use the term sometimes with clients, mental speed bumps. When we put up these mental speed bumps where people have to stop and think like, oh, wait, what do they really mean? It stops that flow. It stops that journey. And so that's what you really want to try to take down with the how you are communicating, with your tone, your vocabulary, all of that. Don't put up these situations where your visitor, no matter what stage they're at, on that awareness level, you don't want to put up those mental speed bumps that I call. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Well, we're getting a little short on time, so I'm going to have Mike go ahead and give his update. And then we still can allow some time if people want to talk to Laura. They can chat with her and ask her more questions after that. Sound good?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, Mike, take it away.
Hey, Yvonne, just a brief update as far as on funding programs. The PPP, the Payroll Protection Program, is still in place. One thing I would urge that businesses and entrepreneurs to do is that if you bank with a larger bank like a Wells Fargo, they have pretty much used their allocations. You may want to seek out a smaller community bank, because those are the ones in which have a greater chance of providing a loan for you through the PPP program. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan, EIDL loan, is back on board. So if you haven't applied for that, you should. If you did apply for this back in early April or late March, you should be getting a notification, or you should have gotten a notification from the SBA by now. We've been hearing from entrepreneurs that those are being dispersed as we speak. And also, I would just say that I see us moving into a different area, as I stated earlier. I think marketing is definitely going to be a push that's going to be needed. We're going to be doing some webinars next week to talk about such things as legal issues. IRS has some tax credits which will assist entrepreneurs through this period. Also, if you're a sole prop, or if you're a private contractor, if you haven't applied for unemployment insurance, I would encourage you to do that. This is the first time in which those have been available to those entities. And as far as the webinars, we will have a 3 p.m. webinar on Monday with an attorney, Ask the Attorney, and then a 3 p.m. webinar on Thursday of next week with the Internal Revenue Service representative. And you can basically ask the IRS and learn about some of the tax credit programs which are coming on board, and some of the extensions for businesses as well. So from there, I'll turn it back to you, Yvonne.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate the update. Yep. So any other questions for Laura? Or if we'd like to, I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking that maybe we save the breakout room idea for another time. If anybody has questions for Laura, or wants to hang out and visit a little bit, that's totally fine. You can unmute yourself and ask your question or give your comment.
Well, I had a quick question. One thing about us is working in various sectors of private organizations, and also consulting with nonprofit organizations. I've always been taught that for those entities, you should include your mission statement. You should include those strategic plans in the About Us section of the website. Is that something that's different, or is that something that's changed?
Well, and yeah, nonprofits, institutions, they're a little bit different than a for-profit business. But I personally, no, I don't like them. I think that, again, it's more for internal use. But as I mentioned, it's the essence of those statements. They can be used, and they do make up the organization's values. But so I think I would just recommend rephrasing them and making them more consumable from from your audience's standpoint. Because a lot of times those mission statements and vision statements, they're done so formally, and I'm just really against, well, again, it depends on the situation, but I really prefer a less formal, more conversational. Again, it's people connecting with people. And when we put up these barriers, when we try to be somebody that, oh, it's not people versus people, it's this organization, and, talking to our constituents. And it just puts up these formal barriers that I don't think are necessary. And I think we can connect so much better on a more personal level. Again, the content there, the essence of those statements, those are important. I just don't like seeing those statements being put up verbatim on a website. Because I think from again, look, talking about a user's experience when they come to a website, what does that really, are they able to understand it, first of all? What does that really tell them? I think you can do a much better job of getting the essence across, getting your values across, if you rewrite it in a way that is really trying to communicate with the audience, rather than formulating a statement that is to drive internal policies. Does that kind of make sense? Does that help? Hello, hello, hello.
Yes, it does. I gave you the thumbs up.
Oh, okay. I can't see that. Sorry. Okay.
If anybody has any topics for future social media breakfast meetings that you'd like to see us get presenters about, you can put that into chat, and Mike, Wes, and I, and Abdul can make note of that. We have some great speakers that are coming up over the next couple of months, and if you have something in particular that you'd like us to be looking for into the summer and fall, we'd love to know what you are looking for and what you're hoping for. So if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to skip right to the thanks for coming. We'll try the breakout room thing next time. I just didn't want to rush everybody and do a bunch of techie stuff at the end. So thanks for coming. We meet the second Friday of each month. So we'll be back in June, and tell your friends and come back and join us again.
Great job, Laura.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Yvonne.
Thanks,
Thank
Laura.
you, Mike. Thank you, Wes. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for attending. And sorry, Yvonne, if I went too long, so you couldn't do the
No.
breakout rooms.
No, totally fine.
It was good information. Thank you.
We'll try it again next time. It was all good info. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Everybody
Thank
have a great
you.
day.
Yep, you too. You too. Are you still there, Yvonne?
Yep, I'm still here.
Oh, okay.
Waiting to make sure nobody puts any suggestions for topics into chat before I take.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and again, yeah, sorry, I don't know. I wasn't, I don't know how long I went.
About 40, about a little over 40 minutes.
Oh, shoot.
That was fine. No, it's okay.
Okay.
I'm always flexible, and it was just an experiment I was going to try anyway to see how the networking would work. And with 14, it's not that big of a deal. If people have questions, they can just ask too.
Yeah.
But
Did I cut out? How was the connection?
Actually, it was pretty good. There was a couple of times, but you were speaking at a pace where people could understand. I think it went pretty well. I recorded the whole thing, so you can watch it later if you want.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, are you going to post that where other people can? Oh,
I'm going to put it on the Facebook page. I'll cut out all this stuff at the end here.